Hey, what's up guys, it's NickTew, and today I'll be showing you guys a Titan build that is so good you'll probably have trouble wanting to play your other characters anymore because it is just that strong. This build quite literally has everything you could ever want it to have. You can just spam your grenade every few seconds, making everything explode like crazy. You can melee every few seconds, just destroying majors, blowing up the whole map, giving you permanent overshield while also spawning a ton of wells to get your abilities back even faster. You can stay alive near indefinitely with volatile rounds, all the while decimating everything in your way with your primary weapon, and every single kill is going to heal you back to full health since we're taking advantage of Devour, and you're going to get more grenade energy that way too. No matter what type of content you're doing, this build is absolutely insane. There's an absolute ton of ways to set this build up, and Titan has some of the best build variation in the game, honestly, especially when it comes to Void 3.0. But over the last day or two, I've been testing this setup and trying to figure out what I think works best universally, so you can bring this into all types of content and have it function just as good. At the end of the video, I'll have an infographic showing exactly how it's set up so that you guys can just easily replicate the build yourselves, but I'll of course be going over everything that I'm taking advantage of and how it functions during the video while mentioning some alternative options, as there are some things that are kind of up to preference and the type of content that you're doing. This build's main focus is going to be around having your abilities available pretty much whenever you want to use them, so you not only have extremely good ad clear potential, but also very high survivability via Devour, and your melee is giving you overshield as well as a few other things. I plan to make another Titan build that fully builds into your shoulder charge and making it do like a ton of damage, similar to a hammer build but just a void version, so make sure to be on the lookout for that video, but that is not the focus of this build today. Like mentioned before, we're going to be taking advantage of Devour via the new fragments that we unlocked from the raid being completed. I literally just covered all this information in the Hunter build video that I posted earlier, so I'm going to show some of those clips again so I don't have to edit them twice. Yes, I am on a Hunter for those clips, but it functions exactly the same way on a Titan. So, now that the race to World First is over and the raid has been completed, we now have access to the new fragments on every character. The main one that we care about is Echo of Starvation, which is going to give us Devour whenever we pick up an Orb of Power. I hate that rhymed. Upon testing this, we can see that whenever we pick up an orb, it's going to give us Devour for a total of 5 seconds. Picking up any subsequent orbs will add another 5 seconds to that timer, capping at a total of 10 seconds. In terms of the Devour buff itself, it functions exactly like it does on Warlock. Each kill will give you grenade energy, as well as healing you to full health, and adding a total of 5 seconds to the Devour buff timer, capping at a total of 10 seconds. Obviously, there's much more to this build than just having Devour, but this is one of the key elements to this build and one of the main reasons that we're able to make it so strong. One caveat with this fragment though is that the game actually doesn't let you pick up any orbs of power if your super is fully charged, meaning that if you have your super up, you can no longer get Devour. Luckily though, there is a workaround for this. If you're using an explosive light rocket launcher, the game will allow you to infinitely pick up orbs even after the max of 6 stacks of explosive light, allowing you to get Devour regardless of how charged up your super is. The same can also be said for Star Eater scales even after 8 stacks of Feast of Light. There may be some other workarounds to this, but I'm not aware of any other than the 2 that I just mentioned, but if you guys happen to know any, please feel free to leave it down in the comments. If you did happen to just learn something or you found any of those tips helpful, please feel free to drop a like on this video as that helps me out an absolute ton. So with that being said, let's get into how we're actually going to be able to take full advantage of Devour and what else we want to use with this build. The spawning orbs part is fairly easy. You just lap on either Harmonic Siphon or Kinetic Siphon, or even both at the same time if you plan on getting a lot of kills with a kinetic weapon, such as Wither Horde, and then you'll just spawn an abundance of orbs. Some people may mention the new fragment that gives you an orb whenever you get a precision kill on a weakened enemy, but honestly, weakening an enemy and then making sure that you get a precision kill, especially while using Volatile Flow, is just way too much effort and extremely inconsistent, so I would not rely on that. Also, running one orb mod on your helmet is pretty free. Alright, that's pretty much all we need to know in order to fully take advantage of Devour. Looking at the rest of the fragments and aspects, let's first start off with aspects. So we're going to be using Controlled Demolitionist, which is going to cause targets to become volatile whenever we hit them with a Void ability, and any additional Void damage will then cause them to explode. You also gain health whenever volatile targets explode near you, which is extremely powerful. We're pretty much going to be taking full advantage of this not only with our melee attack, but also with our weapon, since Volatile Flow is going to proc Volatile, giving us pretty much indefinite healing whenever we need it, while just shooting our weapon, which is like extremely powerful. Just healing while shooting our gun without having to get a kill is like very, very good. For our next aspect, we're going to be using Offensive Bulwark that is going to significantly increase the recharge rate of our grenade, as well as increasing our melee damage whenever we have an overshield. This aspect is a core part of the build, as we're going to be frequently having overshields via our shoulder charge melee, and then we can just spam our normal melee while we have an overshield, which the game will then still count as a powered melee, further extending the duration of the overshield, proccing volatile on enemies, making them explode, as well as spawning wells over and over again. By now you should be able to tell why the melee is just so powerful. For our fragments, of course we're going to be using Echo of Starvation for Devour like mentioned earlier, and then next we have Expulsion, which is going to make enemies explode even more from our void abilities, which is extremely good, pretty much causing a chain reaction of explosions, which is really nice. You could probably experiment without using this one if you're doing content that has very low tier enemies that are already dying really quickly, but I still think that is generally nice to have. Next we have Provision, which will give us a ton of melee energy back whenever we damage enemies with grenades, which we're going to be doing a ton since Devour is going to give us so much grenade energy back. And lastly we have Exchange, which gives us grenade energy whenever we get melee final blows. I'm not sure if this one is actually necessary since we are going to have Devour already giving us so much grenade energy back, but my Titan's gear is like really bad and I just wanted my grenade cooldown to be a tad bit faster. But if your Titan has good gear and you want to use one of the other fragments, feel free to swap this to something else that's really good like Echo of Undermining or Echo of Persistence, which are both fantastic options. Since our grenade and melee are going to feed into each other and work synergistically, our exotic of choice for this build is going to be Heart of Inmost Light, which is not only going to increase the damage of our melee and our grenade, which is pretty good, but also give us some increased ability regen so that we get them back faster. Some other good options for this build include Armamentarium for an extra grenade charge, Mask of the Quiet One for a little bit more survivability, as well as giving you energy whenever you take damage, but it's not going to be all that much energy. There's a few other good options for increasing the effectiveness of our melee, like Dune Marchers or Synthesept or something, but I can't say that I've tested them all with this build, and honestly, this build isn't super focused on making our shoulder charge do a lot of damage. It's more so just having it available more often so that we get better ad clear and on-demand overshields. And also, our melee is already really strong by default. Getting into the weapons, of course the weapon of choice here is going to be Funnel Web, as its high fire rate will proc Volatile Flow as soon as the internal cooldown is up, making it one of the best void weapon options in the game because Volatile Flow just does so much damage. Overall, there's a ton of really good weapon options for this build. I don't want to go over them here, so I'll make sure to leave a long list of good options down below, and feel free to suggest any that you personally like using down in the comments. For our Funnel Web roll, ideally we want some combination of either Subsistence Perpetual Motion or Adrenaline Junkie or Frenzy. Ideally though, probably Subsistence Adrenaline Junkie. For our heavy, we want an Explosive Light Rocket so that we can indefinitely pick up orbs whenever our super is charged, but if you don't mind just like YOLO using your super whenever it's full so you can just still pick up orbs, you can pick a heavy that doesn't have that limitation. Something void would be pretty good to take advantage of Font of Might, maybe something like Red Herring, Royal Entry, Threaded Needle, Deathbringer, even a sword perhaps. The primary doesn't matter all that much, it's heavily up to preference since just having Funnel Web and a heavy pretty much is going to entirely take care of ad clear as well as bosses and majors, but you can't go wrong with a good blinding GL, a good sniper such as Thoughtless, which is pretty good, or Wither Horde. As for our stats, as you can tell, mine are completely horrendous because Titan is my least played character. Honestly, I haven't really been able to play around with which stats I like being higher or like being at max tier because I actually can't get them that high, and we just get so much ability energy back through our exotic, our fragments, our well spawning, our gear mods, etc. that it's really hard to tell how much of a difference the stats are actually going to be making, but it is kind of telling how strong the build is that I'm able to get all these abilities back that quickly with having all my stats this low. But right now I'd recommend focusing on strength since you're going to get a lot of your grenade back via Devour anyway, and then you could just dump the rest into discipline or just a standard recovery. But if you're doing harder content, it can happen often where you aren't able to get your melee back super quickly, so that's why I'd recommend going into strength. Something that's really nice about this build though is that you don't actually need to rely on recovery as much as all the other builds do for healing, since you can actually just, shoot an enemy with your volatile gun and heal it back to full health near instantly, or you can just shoulder charge something for an overshield too, which is really, really good. Meaning that you can dump a lot of your other stats into more strength or more discipline. You don't have to rely on recovery all that much. I can't even imagine how powerful this build is going to be once I get some gear on this guy that isn't complete garbage, and having some more discipline and strength I imagine is going to feel really, really nice. But honestly, it's not entirely necessary. To further round out the build, let's take a look at some of the mods. For our helmet, we have both of the Siphon mods mentioned earlier so we can spawn orbs like crazy, and of course we have Volatile Flow so our Funnel Web can get those volatile rounds. For the arms, we want to make sure that they're arcs so we can get Momentum Transfer, which gives us a ton of melee cooldown whenever we damage enemies with our grenade. which Vortex Grenade is going to be perfect for. I have 2 of these mods on, but you can easily get away with just 1. If your arms happen to be solar, you can use Impact Induction instead, and if they're stasis, you can use one of the Kickstart mods of your choice. And then I just have Font of Might on, so my funnel web can do even more damage, but if you don't like using your gun as much, you can just omit the Font of Might for something else. In terms of how we're going to be spawning these wells in the first place to get Font of Might and Volatile Flow, of course we're going to be using Melee Wellmaker, since we're just absolutely decimating everything with our melees. And what's particularly insane about Melee Wellmaker with the setup is that when you have an overshield, your normal melee is actually going to then count as a charged melee, so even when your shoulder charge is on cooldown, you can still just spawn a ton of Void Wells over and over again, perpetually reducing the cooldown of everything, so you can just get your melee or grenade back again, which is just extremely good. Pair this with Bountiful Wells on the class item, so you spawn 2 wells every single time that you get a melee kill, so you get even more energy back. You get your abilities back extremely fast. On top of that, I like to run Elemental Ordnance so that I have even more options for spawning wells. Initially, I did have this on Melee Wellmaker so that my melees would spawn 3 wells instead of the 2, since they can stack when you put on Bountiful Wells, but I actually dislike there being only one method to spawning wells, and if I happen to not one-shot an enemy with my shoulder charge or something, I wouldn't have a way to spawn a well for a while, and since we're spamming grenades anyways, I felt like this was the go-to option. That's pretty much the bulk of it. The only other thing that really matters is maybe distribution on the class item for just some extra ability energy, but it's pretty minor. The rest is kind of up to preference. I would recommend having either solar or void boots to grab some healing whenever you pick up an orb of power to even further increase your survivability, but it's nothing crazy. That about wraps up the build. Now let's talk about how to actually play with it. Most builds are fairly simple, you kind of just slap it on and go, and while you certainly can do that with this build and it still is going to be extremely powerful, it may just not feel as strong as it could be because you're not fully taking advantage of everything that it has to offer, since there's so many moving pieces and things that work together. Ideally what you want to do is initiate by throwing a grenade to immediately on-demand spawn some wells for your funnel web, and then you want to get some kills with your funnel web that is now buffed with Font of Might and Volatile rounds to then spawn an orb of power, so now you have Devour, so that any subsequent kills are now going to give you more grenade energy and heal you to full health. Now that you have Devour procced, you can start chaining your melee and your grenade back and forth, since each melee kill is going to give you extra grenade energy, and similarly, every grenade hit/kill will give you more melee energy. And then if you ever run out of your ability somehow, you can just shoot your funnel web, which will not only blow everything up itself, but also full heal you, and then you can just throw up a barrier whenever you want to briefly empower your melee or grenade to do more damage, and that's about it. It doesn't really sound that complicated, and honestly, it really isn't that complicated. The main thing is just that if you don't start the encounter with Devour already procced, it can be very easy to just end up never getting Devour procced, since grenade and melee kills, aren't going to spawn orbs in the first place, but if you proc Devour early on and just continue to get kills, it's really easy to keep it active. And the reason that we're going to initiate with our grenade rather than our melee is because our grenade cooldown we can just get back pretty quickly by using our melee, but our melee cooldown we can't get back as quickly, and we can't just start the chain early on because we're not going to have a grenade to use because we didn't get a lot of kills while Devour was active already. Hopefully that makes sense. Otherwise though, the build is fairly straightforward to play, and a lot of what I mentioned is kind of micromanaging and min-maxing it that most people don't really need to worry about. But honestly, the build is crazy, and it actually makes you feel like you're nearly invincible. Having Bubble as our super is a fantastic addition as well, since it's an on-demand overshield and pretty much gives you a full grenade and melee charge back anytime you pop it, so it's an extremely good failsafe, and you get your super back super fast as well. Anyways, that's going to be it for the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to drop a like, as that helps me out an absolute ton. Subscribe for build videos similar to this one, and I will see you guys later. Peace.